Even before the capture of Tobruk by Rommel, Germany had turned against its former ally, Russia. On June the 22nd, 1941, Germany and its allies launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union from the Baltic shore in the north to the Black Sea in the south. The Soviets were caught by surprise. Initially, the Axis invasion of the USSR was a dramatic success. The invading wave swept steadily eastward, reaching the gates of Moscow by the beginning of 1942. We read now from the diary of Richard Angove, musician, later to become Guy's staunch partner and accompanist in Oflag XllB. With great ingenuity, Angove had managed to keep his diary hidden from the innumerable searches conducted by the Germans. We travelled all day Sunday, passing through Mannheim and Frankfurt, among other places. On Sunday evening, we passed through Limburg, which we knew was close to our destination. In a little while, we could see what appeared to be a big castle, miles away in the distance, dominating the landscape. It was a huge building with two big towers at either end, standing on a hill with views of the country for miles around. It did eventually prove to be our home at a little town called Hadamar. We reached there about 7 o'clock, and to our horror found that they would do nothing for us that night, and that we should have to spend another night in the cattle trucks. And now we read from Edward Ward, BBC Frontline reporter in Normal Life. So we had at last arrived at our destination. As I sat on the little parade ground awaiting my turn for the inevitable search, I looked up at the grim grey walls of Hadamar Schloss. It looked a prison indeed. So we were all going to be cooped up in that one building. I cast my mind back almost affectionately to the ramshackle old huts at Modena. In the months to come, Italy was to be remembered as the golden age of captivity. It would never be the same here, I thought to myself. I kept looking up at that forbidding-looking building. Even Moosburg, uncomfortable and dirty though it had surely been better than this, with its crazy cosmopolitan population. It had at least been alive. This place looked like a great grey tomb. For the next 18 months, until March 1945, Guy once again built up a small music production organization. For the first 7 weeks, until the 19th of November, he operated without any kind of sheet music scores. And yet, only 10 days after their arrival in Hadamar Schloss, he had found a few fellow musicians and had started giving short weekly concerts. Guy achieved this by writing out from memory all the parts for short pieces such as Salut d'amour Elgar, The Swan, Saint-Saëns, and Kreisler's Liebeslied. He himself played the violin, with Richard Angove at the piano, which was fortunately within the building. Life in camp was not always serious, however. On the 29th of November, Guy writes, "We are going to attempt a panto for Christmas. This time it will be Ali Baba. Not much music, but the libretto is very good. Quite the funniest panto I have ever seen." During his time in Oflag XllB, with the help of the Red Cross and the YMCA, Guy had built up a substantial orchestra and could start tackling the major works on his mental list. One of the first was the Nicolson Violin Concerto, with Guy taking the solo violin part. Here is the beginning and the end, played now by a professional modern orchestra and soloist. In order to achieve his musical ambitions in the camp, Guy recruited over time an all-male choir of over 30 men. Now, with orchestra and voices, he could deliver not only instrumental pieces, but also major choral works. Of course, he had to give the soprano parts to the high tenors and the alto parts to the baritones, and so on. In 1944 he produced, among others, the famous chorus "Come and Thank Him" from J.S. Bach's Christmas Oratorio. From Wikipedia, we read about the intense warfare that had been waged outside the camp. The German offensive to capture Stalingrad began in August 1942, using the Sixth Army and elements of the 4th Panzer Army. The attack was supported by intense Luftwaffe bombing that reduced much of the city to rubble. The battle degenerated into house-to-house fighting as both sides poured reinforcements into the city. By mid-November, the Germans had pushed the Soviet defenders back at great cost into narrow zones along the west bank of the Volga River. However, if we jump to the beginning of February 1943, the Axis forces in Stalingrad, having exhausted their ammunition and food, surrendered after 5 months, 1 week, and 3 days of fighting. It is now April 1944. From Guy's letters we read, "A single vocal score of Gilbert and Sullivan's operetta, The Gondoliers, has come in. This means hours and hours of work for me, casting the parts, orchestrating the piano score, and fixing rehearsals. But I welcome it. First, here is the program, all printed out with my signature at the bottom of page 1. And now the actual stage backdrop, painted by the father of my friend in the UK, Ian Dobson.
Short-coated, cool beauty, devoted, just something and I. When morning is breaking, our couches forsaking, to greet their awaking, with carols we come, and summer days morning, when weary and loading, our melodies joyful is chasing and running, with melodies joyful, lazy, lazy, come, songs all are singing, a vigil we keep. When daylight is fading, and raptured like shading, with soft serenading, we sing them to sleep. With soft serenading, we sing them to sleep. Serenading, we sing them to sleep. We are gondolieri, gondolieri, ta-la-la-la-la, ta-la-la-la-la, gondolieri, gondolieri, ta-la-la-la-la,
In the camp with Guy at the time was the Earl Dowick Haig, son of General Douglas Haig from World War I. Earl Haig painted the picture of Guy rehearsing his small orchestra. This is what he wrote in his book, My Father's Son. Once a month, a special train came in, delivering a load of old and disabled people who were helped out of the train by nurses who led them limping to the hospital on the hill beyond. Each morning, a number of coffins were taken to a grave among the trees at the top of the hill. We saw no train leave the station carrying departed patients.
The first people killed at Hadamar were children, followed by residents from nursing homes and other group quarters. Nearly all were German and had physical or developmental disabilities and/or mental illness. The gassing was halted after about 8 months due to the complaints of townspeople about the stench of the fumes, along with the efforts of the Catholic Bishop of Münster, a sharp critic of the Nazis. The ovens were simply dismantled and shipped to new, more infamous extermination camps in Sobibor and Treblinka.
Working in a different world, Guy turns to the genius of the French composer Camille Saint-Saëns. Again, he takes the part of the solo violin. Just as the morning fog lifted on March the 7th, Lieutenant Colonel Leonard Engelmann, heading a task force of the American 9th Armored Division, was stunned to look through his binoculars and see the Ludendorff Bridge over the Rhine at Remagen still intact, with German vehicles still rumbling across it. By the same evening, American infantry had established a bridgehead and were now on the east side of the Rhine. From Edward Ward, back in the camp, when the news of the capture of the bridge at Remagen came through, both we and the guards knew that the end was only a matter of time. And now, lastly, from Angov. Last night, we gave the Brahms Requiem, though it wasn't due to be performed until tomorrow week. However, it went very well indeed. In recognition of Guy's contribution to the culture and morale of Oflag XllB, Major Hugh Nichols wrote to Richard Angov. But among the things that haunt us, you'll remember, you and I, one man for whom the music still rang true. For however and wherever there was music, there was Guy. And for that we may be thankful. Yours, Hugh.